is coming, that more people will come.
People have a way of showing up for like sweet theme stuff, so too.
That's very true.
In oh God, where was it? A couple events ago, like when it started, I think there were only like 20 people there, and then we had like 30 more people show up as like after it started. So, you never know. Okay. What's that?
Start.
Yeah, whenever.
Well, good evening, and welcome to an evening with Nico Lang. Welcome to those who are joining us online. A couple of housekeeping bits for those who are in the building. If you haven't been here before, I'm Catherine. I'm the pastor. The bathrooms are just to the left as you came in the door. Gender-neutral bathrooms, obviously. If you need drinks, they're outside. There's coffee, hot chocolate, whipped cream, marshmallows, everything you need to get fat. So without further ado, you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from Nico, so I'm going to introduce Nico Lang. Over to you.
Oh, okay, I'm introducing myself. All right.
Yes.
So, I don't know. I wrote this book, American Teenager, how trans kids are surviving hate and finding joy in a turbulent era. Other than that, I'm a longtime LGBTQ+ journalist. I have been working in the field for about like 15 years. I've reported for more places than I haven't. I'm not going to list them because that would be very boring. You can just Google me. Other than that, I run an Instagram account called Queer News Daily. You can find me on there at least once a day posting about the shit show hellhole that we're living through right now. When I'm not doing all that, I live in LA with my husband. He's really lovely. We have 2 cats, one of whom I love very much and the other I tolerate, you know, as it goes with cats. One has to be an angel and one has to be a demon sent directly from hell. And then I really like old movies, but not in the way that like Gen Z thinks that like Legally Blonde is an old movie. Like I love when they still call them like talkies, and like with the Thin Man movies, they sort of were like figuring out how sequels worked. So when the first sequel picks up, it picks up literally when the last movie left off, because otherwise they thought people would be confused. Like, what were the characters doing in the in-between time? And it's like, I don't know, living their lives. And yeah, I've been on this tour traveling with this book now for 16 months. I've been to, I think this is my 153rd stop in 46 states. We're hitting the other 4 this year, so don't you worry about that. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I've never been to Gainesville before. So.
Well, we're glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here. And usually this starts out with a little reading from the book, so I'm not going to buck tradition, so I'm going to do that. Normally, I actually, in a normal circumstance, I would probably read from the Florida chapter, given that one of the chapters takes place in Florida. But one of the chapters also takes place in an Episcopal church. And to me, it's just I've been thinking a lot about the themes of this chapter, and then being in a faith space, I just feel like it feels very germane. So to lead us into sort of what's happening here, I spent a year traveling the country to document the stories of trans youth in 7 different states. We'll see if I can do this in order. South Dakota, Alabama, West Virginia, Texas, Florida. Wait, no, I'm already messing it up. Illinois, Florida, and then California was last. And my goal was really to show trans kids as they are. So what I did was I wrote essentially a fly-on-the-wall documentary where for 2.5 weeks I would follow these families around in a non-creepy way and just kind of do whatever they did. If they were eating dinner, I would be eating dinner. If they were going to the homecoming game, I would go to the homecoming game. If they were to jump out of an airplane, I would have jumped out of an airplane with them, which I'm really glad we didn't because I have jumped out of an airplane before. It's bad. Don't do it. If anyone ever invites you, just don't go. It's terrible. And really, for me, what it was about is that I feel like we in the media right now hear so much about trans kids, but we very rarely ever hear from trans kids. It's very rarely about lifting up their voices and perspectives. Like yesterday, just randomly when I was in Jacksonville, I was eating this absolutely delicious Jamaican place for lunch, and they had CNN on, and they were talking about the court case at the Supreme Court where they're debating sports bans, banning K through 12 students from trans students from playing sports is sort of the reductive way to describe it. And they had Kristen Wagner on, who is one of the attorneys with Alliance Defending Freedom, and then one of the cis women athletes who's been fighting to ban trans people from sports. And already there were no trans people at the table, right? They weren't interviewing any trans person. They weren't consulting any trans person how they feel about this. And then even more than that, what really got me, and I almost started crying at the table because it made me so upset, is the girl at the center of the case, who I've interviewed actually through my work. Her name is Becky Pepper Jackson. She's a really, really lovely girl, just the sweetest little thing. They kept referring to her as the plaintiff. They wouldn't call her by name. They wouldn't use her pronouns. They wouldn't do anything to humanize her or recognize her humanity. She was just the plaintiff. And to me, that's really why I wrote this book, is I wanted to humanize these stories. I wanted to put trans kids back at the center of their own stories. I feel like right now we're witnessing just so much profound erasure. We're witnessing so much of people being stripped of their own humanity, and this book is just all about people's humanity. And in this particular case, in Texas, I had the opportunity to spend 2.5 weeks with a religious family there. They are Episcopal. They go to a pretty progressive church in Houston, and we're going to pretend this is rudimentarily Houston. It's kind of up here. Their family's really tremendously lucky. Their daughter, Ruby, who was 19 at the time, although she's older now, kids do that, they keep aging. I'm just pick an age, God, But she'd been very, very, very fortunate in that her parents figured out when she was quite young that she's trans. So they did their homework. They read every book. They really educated themselves. So that way, when she did come out eventually, they already were okay, thumbs up. We got you, girl. We were ready. And that's very, very fortunate for a lot of reasons. One, it's just, having parents that affirm and support you. That's really lucky. Not everybody has that. But even having people in your life that were willing to do the work. So many queer people and trans people I know have to educate everybody in their lives, right? They're constantly educating people. Here, she didn't have to do that. That's really cool. She had this boyfriend at the time when I was writing the chapter. It was going really well, except then she figured out she was a lesbian and dumped him. But before then, it was really great and just going swimmingly. And then on top of that, she goes to a really, really, as I said, supportive church. When she came out as trans, they threw her a coming out party, which we'll hear a little bit about in this chapter. It's called a renaming liturgy, where you sort of take your confirmation certificate, you destroy it, and you get a new one with your name on it. And it's that idea of discarding the person everyone thought you were in favor of the person God intended you to be. And it's a beautiful ceremony, and the thing that hurt my heart is knowing that every kid can't have that, or every kid doesn't have that, right? And a lot of people don't even know that it exists. And one of the reasons I wanted to uplift this story is something that Molly told me. That's Ruby's mom. The first time I called her, she said that journalists call her really often because they hear that there's a family of a trans kid in their area who's religious, and they want to tell that story. But then when I find out that Ruby actually has a hopeful, positive story, that she hasn't had a lot of trauma and rejection, they aren't interested in that story. They aren't interested in the story of the church that got it right. They only want to hear the story of brokenness and pain. And I just think that we need to uplift those stories. We need to show models of churches and faith communities getting it right and supporting people and loving people as they are. I just think that's a message that everyone needs to hear right now. And that's why I'm going to read this section. And if you don't like it, well, then too bad. Okay, so for those who maybe have read the book, this is the first section of chapter 4. It's called The Samaritan Woman. The walls of St. Mary's Episcopal Church in Houston are bare as a padded cell as the Reverend Marquita Hutchins, wrapped in purple cloth, delivers the weekly homily. In today's address to the congregation, she asks churchgoers to rethink what they know about the Samaritan woman from the Gospel of John, with whom Jesus shares a drink of well water before revealing himself to be the Messiah. Identified only as a resident of Samaria in central Palestine, She has for centuries been cast in a bad light on account of her marital status. She's a serial divorcee cohabitating with a man who is not her husband. Approximately 2 millennia before the socialite Zsa Zsa Gabor would make 5 failed marriages look unambitious by comparison. If you laughed at that, thank you. That's my favorite joke in the whole book. Also, sometimes it's funny you're allowed to laugh, so let's practice. Ha 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 ha! You're doing great already. You were born for this. The Samaritan woman has alternately been described by biblical scholars as an adulteress and a woman of shame, but there's nothing in the Bible to suggest that, Reverend Hutchins says. If the average lifespan in the single digits of BCE was just 35 years, she could have been an extremely unfortunate widow, or simply doing what she needed to survive during a time in which women weren't permitted to work outside the home. Hutchins urges the congregation to instead look at the Samaritan woman as Jesus sees her, calling her a striking example of a faithful woman. The Samaritan woman goes on to become an enthusiastic evangelist, a witness to the transforming power of faith, she says. She uses her voice and her experience to gather more believers to Jesus. That sermon is a statement of purpose for the LGBTQI plus affirming St. Mary's. If women are rarely given a fair shake in mainstream Christianity, dating back with Eve, shackled with the blame for man's fall from grace, neither are queer people. Sorry, my lunch is trying to come back. The message on this particular morning, however, is hard to hear over a toddler's determined jabber, made ever the more piercing by the removal of crosses and other sound-absorbent decor in observance of Lent. Next to the young girl is Ruby Carnes, who sits patiently as the child takes thick plastic zebras and giraffes out of his Ziploc bag, loudly introducing Ruby to the members of her zoo one by one. A tranquil hush falls over the room when the child is mercifully led away to Sunday school, but as the older girl notes, her former charge had some trouble with taxonomy. She got the names of the animals wrong every single time, Ruby says, shaking her head in mock disapproval as the child is escorted through a tiny door at the back of the church. Every single time. Despite the factual errors, Ruby had listened calmly to the child, warmth radiating from the porcelain skin she diligently keeps out of the sun. Here in this blank space, she looks beatific, attired like a film noir blonde in a black sleeveless turtleneck and burgundy nails that match the pew cushions. Like all of Ruby's sartorial choices, the synchronicity of hues is not an accident, but rather the result of assiduous planning. She puts a great deal of thought into what she wears, whether it's a thrifted polka dot tank top featuring a cartoon bee exclaiming, "Sting me," or a simple red dress. It's thus not terribly surprising that she can quote by heart the entirety of The Devil Wears Prada, a dishy workplace dramedy that's become its own sacred text for aspiring fashionistas like herself. A famous speech in which Meryl Streep's Imperious magazine editor witheringly humiliates her reluctant protege, played by a very bang-forward Anne Hathaway, by educating her on the history of cerulean, is recited verbatim on a near-daily basis. So much of Ruby's life is determined by her costume of the day, her attire representing one small thing in the world she can control. When thinking back on her coming out at St. Mary's almost exactly 2 years prior, Ruby remembers not how she felt but what she wore: a blue sundress with green strappy heels and gold wire earrings shaped like flowers. "I could have gone with different shoes, but I didn't own any sandals," she tells me after today's sermon ends. "And I would have gone with a necklace and little earrings instead because I had big hair that day. It didn't make sense to also have big earrings." I just also realized I'm doing an impression of her, which is kind of rude, but so no one tell her. In June 2021, St. Mary's hosted a renaming liturgy for Ruby, a ceremony in the Episcopal tradition that marks the riddance of a transgender individual's birth name in favor of the person that was their destiny to become. As bursts of late afternoon sunbeams streamed through the skylight on that momentous Sunday, the church's wooden pews teemed with masked faces, many of which belonged to family members and longtime friends. Just as some young women have cotillions, God, who wrote this, to mark their entrance into society, this rite of passage served a similar purpose. Surrounded by her dearest relations, Ruby would claim her womanhood for her own. She announced to the world not only a new name, but also her true self, after so many years of hiding. The hour-long liturgical ceremony began with parishioners standing for an opening hymn and a song of praise before joining in a series of scriptural readings, including Corinthians 3:12 through 18, a promise that those who accept God's love will be lifted toward the divine. "Now the Lord is the Spirit, And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, the passage reads in part. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are changed into his likeness from one degree of glory to another. Episcopal rites are characterized by their soothing sameness, the comfort of already knowing the major plot beats. Worshippers have sung these exact numbers and read these exact parables aloud together dozens upon dozens of times throughout their lives, but placing Ruby's journey at the center gave those familiar words new meaning. Leading the church in a reflection, Ruby said that the verses from Corinthians represented being able to embrace herself fully, and by doing so, allowed those around her to embrace her as well. Following a process of becoming that had sometimes proven turbulent, she proclaimed to her fellow churchgoers that the gospel offers a message of peace. It says that I shouldn't worry about my body or what I wear, that I should just be who I am and be at peace with God, Ruby said in her speech, towering above the altar as she addressed gatherers. I think that message is something we all need to hear every day. So often we worry too much about things that don't matter, no matter how real they may seem to us. I was so worried about what other people would think of me when I came out. But I really just can't care about that. Jesus loves me, and he loves you too. Frankly, that's the most important thing to me. We're going to stop there. If you want to know how it ends, you're going to have to buy the book. So, thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Nico.
And now's the part you applaud. Thank you, thank you.
You speak fast. You bring so much in such a short period of time. I love the fact that the Episcopal Church is doing these naming ceremonies, because we've been doing them for quite a while here, and I know other places in Gainesville do. I think UCG. No? Ah, okay. That's something you need to be doing. It's definitely important. I know the first one that I did here was so meaningful, because it really is allowing people to stand up and say, this is who I am before God. And there are so many places that don't allow that. And so I don't know if you want to share, you've had this positive experience with the Episcopal Church, but have you had other experiences with the young people who are not so positive?
Oh, well, I think in the book, we don't really get to capture too much of that, because I think the rejection story, that comes in. So we have 3 chapters that explicitly deal with religion. Sorry, I made the mistake of having a huge late lunch right before this, which was really stupid of me. You never do that before speaking, like rule 1. But it was so yummy. It was Cuban food. What was I supposed to do? Say no? So I blame my chauffeur.
That's real, thank you.
Steered me wrong. Delicious, though. What was it called? Flacos. Oh, amazing. So we have 3 stories of faith in the book. 2 of them are positive, 1 are negative. The 2 positive ones we just heard from Ruby. The other positive one might be a surprise to some folks. So that was Clint in Illinois. He is Muslim. His family is Muslim. And it was interesting because his mosque just kind of hadn't said anything about it one way or the other. Like he, when he was presenting publicly as female, he would go and worship with the women during service because it's gender segregated. But then after he came out and started dressing as himself, he started worshiping with the men, and just nobody said anything. And they didn't look a gift horse in the mouth. They're like, you're not bringing it up, we're not bringing it up. And it just has never really been an issue. And I just felt like presenting that sort of more nuanced depiction of an affirming Muslim community, or affirming sort of on their terms, that just felt really cool to me. I'm really glad I got to tell that story. But we do balance that, with a less positive story in the book. And that's the first chapter, that's Wyatt's family. So his parents, Jeremy and Susan, are now, Susan is a pretty vocal trans advocate, fighting on behalf of her son and then trans kids all across the state in South Dakota. She runs this really amazing organization called South Dakota Transformation Project. You should look it up. They're doing incredible work. They got a $250,000 donation from Ariana Grande a couple of years ago. So it's okay, slay divas. But that wasn't really always the case in Susan's life. It's not that she was ever really unaffirming or hated queer and trans people or something. But she was the daughter of 2 Baptist missionaries and born on a Baptist. Yeah. She was literally born on a Baptist mission trip in Brazil, right? And still has dual citizenship because of it. And when her son came out, she just didn't know anything about this at all. She'd I don't think she'd even really heard the word transgender before. Or like maybe she'd heard about it, but she didn't really like understand. Like it was just like not a part of her world, and it hadn't been part of her life. But you know, much like Ruby's parents did, she just read everything. She read every book, every pamphlet, everything that she could get her hands on, and she really educated herself. And at the end of her like sort of process of study, she sent packets to family members, sort of like reintroducing them to like Wyatt, you know, providing them with research studies on the importance of like affirming like a trans child, you know, using their like name and pronouns, and just really like educating the members of her family about like this is who Wyatt is and this is how we treat him. And in their family, it was actually received like famously. Everyone did really great, and I think they're still like doing a really lovely job at just being like supportive allies. But at their church, it wasn't quite as warm. They were given a choice that they could either they could force Wyatt to come to church as a girl and reject his identity, or they could leave. And they chose their son, and they would choose him a million times over. And it's been, we don't talk about it as much in the book because it wasn't, I think, the story that their family wanted to tell as much. I really deferred to like their judgment of like, what do you feel like is your story? But knowing Susan, you know, Wyatt's mom, it's been a really difficult process for her to sort of come back to her faith because she still identifies as a religious person. She still believes in God, but figuring out her own relation to that, or like what God means to her now, has been really difficult. And she's sort of formed like a worship group with like friends where they meet together for essentially like weekly like private Bible study. And I know so many folks in my life that due to the rejection they've faced, they've kind of been on a similar trajectory. Like I really identify with that. And that I grew up Catholic. We can talk about the trauma of that another time. It was so funny because I was actually easily the most religious member of my family. I was always begging my parents to go to church and like asking them why, because we were priest or Catholics, we never went, right? And I was always like, we've got to go, we've got to go, we've got to go. And then eventually in high school, I decided to rebel against my sinning parents by becoming a Southern Baptist, which if there's a boy was I wrong list, that's got to be in the top 5. That was real stupid. And I came out in church, actually. I decided that I was going to force them to accept me. And I was once voted most confrontational, so it sort of tracks with my personality, that I was going to force them to accept me on their terms, and if they didn't like it, that's their problem. And for the most part, everybody was really cool. One of my best friends, her dad was a pastor at that church, and we had a really long, lovely talk for about like 2 hours, where we just, you know, talked about everything and really aired everything out. And we talked about, you know, what all this meant from like a theological lens. And at the end of it, I straight up asked him, like, am I going to hell? And he laughed and he said, oh, honey, not for that. You know, maybe for other reasons, you know. And it was just really, you know, he had a lesbian sister. Still has a lesbian sister. And it was just really lovely to hear that from somebody who, you know, that I looked up to and really respected. But the senior pastor of the church, our sort of director of spiritual worship, told me that he pulled me in for a meeting. He told me God was waiting for me with a sniper rifle to cut me down if I didn't change my ways. And I thought that was so weird, just because I'm like, where's God getting a sniper rifle? Like, what are the gun policies in heaven? Is it like open carry? Like, is it like unlimited bullets like in a video game? Does he have to reload? Like, I just had so many questions that I couldn't ask because it wasn't appropriate. And even though so many people in that church were really supportive and really cool, it just took one guy to ruin it, because it was like he was, everything we learned in church was because of him. Like, he wrote the sermons. Like, he was the person who was guiding like my spiritual journey. And I just knew that if I was serious about my relationship with God or just my own humanity, that I just couldn't walk that path there. I needed to leave. And it took me a really long time to sort of find my way back to faith. For a long time, I was an atheist just because I think I was really mad. I was just sort of like, you know, angry about the whole thing. And then I eventually sort of found my way back through Buddhism, which has been really lovely. It's like, if there are 5 things I can genuinely say changed my life, like Buddhism's probably like 2 of them. And I've started going to an MCC church in LA, and that's been really wonderful and a really great way to find community. But it just, I wish I hadn't had to do that. You know, I wish it hadn't taken me so long to get back to a good place with this stuff. And for the kids in this book, seeing that there are 2 young people who don't have to walk that journey, who just like look at their religion, at their faith, as being this piece in their life, as something that gives them strength, that just makes me feel so good knowing that there are people who won't have to spend like decades unpacking their trauma. Like Ruby, has been through a lot since the book came out. We might talk about it a little later, but she's doing kind of well, right? Like she's kind of okay. And I credit that to a lot of things. Her parents have done a bang-up job. She's just a good girl. She's just like a smart person with a head on her shoulders. And I love the heck out of that girl. But I think it's also because of her church. I think it's because she's always had that strong foundation that no matter what's going on in the world, she knows that God loves her and accepts her. It's what we were getting at with the renaming liturgy, right? Yeah. That like God loves her just the way that she is. No exceptions, right? And I just think knowing that, having that certainty means the world. And I wish more kiddos could hear that message.
Yeah, I think when I think about trans youth, that I think the message of negativity mainly comes from churches, like I want to say the white national Christian, although I don't really want to put the Christian in there, but that movement. But also, I think one of the biggest problems that I've seen over the years, and I've lived in England, Australia, and here, and it's no different, is the gay, the LG part of the community. There is a disconnect so often with the T. Yeah. And I don't know if you had any experience with that in your writing, in your travels.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think I would have said that about like 15 years ago, right? That I think we saw a real division in the community, when trans issues were sort of like first coming to like public prominence as in terms of being part of the discourse. Because it's not like trans people were invented like 15 years ago, but they'd been so like forced down by the movement somewhat intentionally. Like you look at these videos of like Sylvia Rivera in the 1970s really like fighting the LGBT movement for intentionally putting trans people back. That it was a conscious decision that was made because, it was sort of a way of making our rights more marketable, that trans people were seen as being too fringe, too weird, too extreme. So it's like if we wanted our rights, we had to make ourselves like as cookie as cutter as possible for like, the average American. It's so funny. I had a roommate who used to like spit these like talking points all the time, and we would always argue to the death about them. So I have some experience with that sort of thing. But I don't know. I think in my own life, the like gay and lesbian and bisexual people I know, it feels like folks have come a long way. And maybe I'm Pollyanna. I can be really Pollyanna about things. So I
think you're in
that.
California makes you Pollyanna as well.
But
because
no.
I'm getting nods because the experience in Florida is not.
But even if you look at actually, the reason I say this is that if you look at data on the subject, there was this survey that came out this year that polling people on their opinions of trans rights, of like, should trans people be able to do this? Do they deserve like full equality when it comes to bathroom use, sports, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The highest, other than trans people themselves, the highest group of people to support that of any group polled were lesbians. And there was something about that I just found really heartening, because I think we've heard so much about like, TERFs and the sort of the trans exclusionary movement within lesbian spaces, the sort of women's Michigan festival or Mishfest sort of thing. And that's very real. That is absolutely happening. And it's still happening. There are still people that you can follow on the internet who are happy to spout those kind of talking points. But I don't think we hear enough about like the real allyship in our community. Like so many people in my life I know have really like done the work and tried to educate themselves. And I think part of that is this sort of like a horrible backhanded compliment to the Trump administration, right? Because we've seen the ways in which what they'll do is they will take a tiny issue like trans sports and use it as a wedge issue to get at other things. And I think that something that I like that people have done is reemphasize over and over again that like cis gay men, if you think this isn't about you, they're coming after you next. They're using this as a way to get to you. The thing that I want to see people emphasize, though, is that we need to show up for each other anyway. Yes. Right? That even if they weren't coming for you next, even if this has nothing to do with you, we all still need to fight for each other. Like I fight for people whose liberation is seemingly separate from mine, because it's absolutely intertwined with mine. You look at like the rights of immigrants right now. If they control one group of people's bodies, like one group of people's way that they move through space, they can do that to anyone. And I really wish we emphasized that more, that you should show up for people even if it seems like it has nothing to do with you, because in some way it does. And we just need to be better allies for each other, just full stop, no matter what that means.
Yeah, that's like the Nehemiah poem that, if they came for these people and then they keep coming until it's your group and there's nobody left. Yeah. So, yeah, I totally agree. It really is about coming out for each other. And, one of the things, bit off topic of your book, but kind of on topic, that so many times I have heard, but I don't understand trans people. And I think what's really positive in the book is where you explain how the parents in a couple of cases have really done their homework. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I would say to anybody that's joining us online or sat here is, if you do not understand something, read it. Read about it. But you know what? You do not have to understand it to love people. I don't understand half the people in my congregation, trust me, yeah. on a daily basis, but it doesn't stop me loving them.
Yeah. The example that I often use from this, and it sounds really silly, but go with me for a second. My husband and I seem very different, but on paper, but I feel like when it comes to our likes and interests, there's usually a great deal of overlap, except for one huge sticking point culturally in our relationship, and that is Crazy Frog. Does anyone know what Crazy Frog is? Okay, we've got to, yeah. If you don't, good for you. It's maybe the worst thing to happen to popular music, in my opinion, in the past 20 years. It's this stupid Swedish cartoon frog with a tiny little whatever is going on out there. And he does covers of famous pop songs, but he'll sing over them in gibberish. It's this sort of Minion-style gibberish where he's just going ding, 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 and that's his whole thing. It's so stupid. And for some reason, my husband loves this garbage. He's obsessed with Crazy Frog. And every time I leave on one of my many tours, I've been, touring for the past 16 months, I just picture him jamming at home, listening to the Crazy Frog oeuvre. And I do not understand it. I could read an entire book trying to explain the appeal of Crazy Frog to me, and I still would not get it. That said, I love knowing that he has something in his life that makes him happy. Even if I don't get it, even if I could never get it in a million years, even if I don't want to get it, it still brings him joy. Yeah. And I think about the same thing with trans youth, walking their own paths and deciding who they are for themselves, expressing their own agency, reaching for their own particular hopes and dreams, that no one else needs to get that. All they have to do is support them wanting those things. Yeah. All they have to do is recognize their joy. And who doesn't want people in the world to have joy, to find happiness? I just can't imagine ever being against someone's happiness. It's if I can support my husband liking Crazy Frog, you guys can anybody can support a trans person. So one of these is a much bigger leap than the other. It's just letting people be themselves. I just think it's really, at the end of the day, letting people be happy isn't really that hard. Yeah. As you said, you don't have to understand it. That's not your journey. You just need to love people.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to go back to you writing this book. How on earth did you get people to trust you enough with their entire life and get the information you needed for this book?
Yeah, well, part of it gets down to that I've been doing this work for a really long time. I may look young, and I swear I am, but I've secretly been kind of doing this forever, and specifically when it comes to working with families of trans kids. The first story I ever did was in 2016 for Teen Vogue. I profiled this family in Texas, who some of you may know. It was Amber Briggle's family. Amber Briggle is sort of one of the more vocal advocates, parent advocates, fighting on behalf of not only her own trans kids, but also trans kids across the country, right? And at the time when I interviewed them, Amber had had a lot of really bad experiences with other reporters that reached out to her family, just asking really inappropriate, out-of-pocket stuff. And I just maybe I was raised well or something, but I just can't imagine asking an adult in my life about their genitals, let alone a child. And I just treated them normally. I treated their kid like a human being, and I was nice to them. And I don't know, I thought was just a professional who treated them just like I would anyone else. And it was just weird because that went such a long way with them. And they really remembered me. And after, that experience, they recommended me to other parents and kids in their network, being like, if you need your story told, reach out to Nico. They're going to do right by you. So it went from I had, at one time, no families of trans kids in my life to now half of my phone is families of trans youth. And when I was thinking about or sort of, had in the back of my head that I wanted to write a book like this, I think for me, one of the reasons that I knew I could write it and I knew I should write it is that I had those networks in place already. I had that level of trust built in to where I knew that these families would trust me with their lives and trust me with their vulnerability. As you were sort of saying, it's a lot to let somebody into your home for 2.5 weeks to just watch you do everything. It just takes an enormous level of trust and vulnerability. And with that, I think parents had to know that they were going to be okay, that this person would do right by them, the same way that I had done with Amber. And I think also my approach was a little different than most, in that I never assumed I knew what anyone's story was. I think in general, I kind of don't. I try to really, whenever I'm on the phone with somebody interviewing them, I try to really let them educate me about their story. I don't do a lot of really leading questions. I kind of really am there to listen, and I let them guide the conversation without them knowing that they're guiding the conversation, right? They don't realize that's what they're doing, but that's what they're doing. It takes a lot of work to be able to interview like that. It's not easy, but you get good at it after a while. And it was the same with these families, that when I showed up, rather than deciding for them what their stories were, I asked them, what do you think your story is? What do you think is the most important narrative to express in this book? What do you think needs to be said right now? And I always deferred to that. I always just sort of decided okay, based on what they expressed to me, how do I use my skills and my expertise from all these years in the field in order to sort of build a narrative around expressing that theme? For Rydian, for example, in Alabama, I was a little nervous about that initially because he talked about, or he wanted to talk about his journey toward getting top surgery and how important that was to him. And I loved that for him, and I loved that that meant so much to him. And it wasn't that I felt any kind of way about anybody getting the kind of medical care that they want. Everybody in this room should have whatever medical care that they need, and will help, make them a well person. What gave me some sort of trepidation is just that, as I explained to him, there's a lot of wackos out there. And there are a lot of people who are gonna feel a certain way about you talking about this sort of thing. And you're still really young and you have so much of your life to live. And I just don't want that sort of thing to follow you around forever if for some reason you end up regretting saying that in this book many years from now. It's not that you'll regret the medical care that you received, but being so honest about it and talking about it so openly, that's just a really big decision because you can't take it back. If it's in a book, it's in print forever. And I just wanted him to be safe. I just worry, he's my friend now. I worry about him being safe, and I just want him to be safe in this world that is often very scary. So we talked about that, and I just really trusted him and his family to make that decision for themselves. That was a story that they really wanted to tell, so I had to say, okay, let's tell that story. That's what we're here to do. I am here to support you. And I think that just really meant a lot to the kids, that I was willing to trust them to to decide what their stories were. That I didn't decide that I know better than anyone else what their stories are, because I don't. And I think that journalists do that all the time. When those journalists, call her to be oh, we only want to tell the sad story about your family, they're deciding that they know their story better than hers. They're deciding which stories are valuable. And in this book, I didn't do that. I just went with families that I really connected with, right? That I felt like I had some sort of rapport with, and that I could, felt like we could really trust each other, and that I trusted that whatever story came out of that relationship would be beautiful and valuable, and that people would really benefit from hearing it. And I don't know, humbly, I think we did okay.
I think so. You talk about that, and that's the positive side of it. But I know that getting a book like this out there...
Hell.
Hell? Yeah, that's what I want to know.
Hell on earth. I mean, working with the families is already really hard, not because they're like awful, horrible people or something, but just because it's just like you're just feeling so much all the time. It was like the most intensive, like 2.5 week therapy session of your life that just doesn't end. It's like day after day after day. We're just like sitting down and just really in like the emotional thunderdome of like everything that's ever happened, the good stuff, the bad stuff, the in-between stuff. It was like shoving a year of therapy into 2.5 weeks, which ended up actually being really helpful for a lot of the families because it helped them work through some stuff that they just hadn't really like talked about or like had the spoons, I think, to deal with. Because just, you know, the enormity of what they'd been through, it was just, even in therapy, kind of hard to really talk about. Or friends that they'd known their entire lives, it's just really hard to casually be like, so let's talk about my daughter being detransitioned by the state of Florida. You know, it just doesn't really come up in casual conversation. So they were just holding on to this trauma all the time. So it ended up being, you know, it wasn't necessarily the intention, but it ended up being really beneficial for them because it helped them to really start that journey of working through that stuff, this stuff that they hadn't really dealt with before. But doing that all the time at the time, like we could all feel it. We could feel it every single day. Jack in Florida, one of so it was trans siblings there, 19-year-old trans girl at the time. There was this day she just like stayed in her room, like drinking sleepy time tea and just like shaking. Because it was like, there was this moment where people who have been through like wartime trauma talk about this, that you'll have this moment afterward where your body starts to process this bad thing that happened to you because you're finally letting yourself feel it. And it was this moment where she was finally letting herself feel it, and she just literally needed to sort of like stay in her room and like shake for the day. And I think our bodies were all feeling some measure of that. Like when I got home and I got, you know, turned in my first chapter of the book, all my friends had been telling me, oh, it'll be like this weight lifted off of you and you'll feel so much better. That is not true. I felt horrible. And I always think everything's COVID because I'm like a lifelong hypochondriac till the day I die, baby. And I like, if I got smacked in the face with the green screen door, I would think it was COVID. I'd be like, ow, is this COVID? So I went to my doctor to just like get it checked out and make sure that everything was like copacetic. And he does the, you know, the little like doctor stuff. And at the end of it, he's like, well, good news, it's not COVID. Bad news, your blood pressure is 160 over 100, which if you're a child and you don't know what that means, that's bad. You don't want that blood pressure. Legally, I was not allowed to leave until my blood pressure went down. And I tell that story not, you know, to be like, oh, woe is me, like I'm doing fine. I'm on several medications now that are lovely, beta blockers, what a sleigh. I tell that story because I think about the kids. I think about their families. Like, I got to leave. You know, I got to go home. I didn't have to, like, sit in that trauma all the time. And in these states where you're being re-traumatized over and over and over again by these state lawmakers and these legislators that are just doing this to you repeatedly ad nauseum without end in sight, like, how is your body feeling? And that's just, like, we just have to create a better government. We have to create a better society that stops doing this to people because this is not sustainable. And then when it comes to the other hell of just like getting this book picked up, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Everybody always assumes that like if you got a book published that people lined up around the block for you and everyone wanted to work for you or work with you and you got like a $250,000 book deal. To that I say, ha 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 ha. No one wanted this book. Everyone turned us down. I've probably been turned down at this point in every language, even Esperanto. I've been turned down in languages I've never heard of, you know? And it's just, it took a lot of fighting. A lot of that had to do with that I was unwilling to compromise on what I knew this book needed to be. That you find out so much about the publishing industry's biases of what they think queer people want or what they think queer stories are. And we're seeing from heated rivalry right now, right? That people want joy. They want to see queer people living their lives, you know, without the specter of trauma. They don't think that like trauma is the A story. And for me, it was the same thing. That there is trauma here, absolutely. These families have been through a lot, right? And we are very honest about that. But it wasn't the story I wanted to tell most. I wanted to tell a story about joy and resilience and how people survive the things that they go through, right? Like I'm interested in healing. And to me, this book was so much about healing. And it turns out the publishing industry did not want that. We were told that by one publisher, I won't say the name of, Macmillan, that the book was unrealistic because none of the families rejected their kids. To that, I say F you. It's a really good thing I was not in that meeting, because I would have it would have been very Real Housewives. I would have flipped a table and thrown a wine glass. It would not have been good. And then, pretty much every other publisher that turned us down said that there was no market for this book and it won't sell. It wasn't that they didn't think the subject was valuable or that the book needed to exist or they thought the writing was bad, because the writing slaps, I can say. They just thought there was no market for it. And that's one of the reasons that I've been touring the way that I have, over the past 16 months. I've barely been home. Do I even know what my husband looks like? I don't know. But I just feel like I have to prove them wrong. And it's not just for my own ego, although maybe it is a little bit. It's really that as I say in sort of the foreword of this book, I don't want this book to be the last of its kind. I want it to be the first of its kind. I want 1,000 more books like it to exist. Because I've gotten to see firsthand that stories can move mountains. I've gotten to see this book change hearts and minds. There was the woman who runs Mama Dragons, which is a nationwide support group for parents of LDS kids, but really more broadly kind of anybody can go, but it's very much in the LDS space. She gave it to her neighbor, who used to be profoundly transphobic. And not because she's a bad person. I met her, she's a lovely gal. It's just that she just didn't know. She had a lot of questions, and there were just lots of whatabouts that sort of would trip her up. And she gave her a copy of this book, and she's really come a long way. She's a therapist, and she's started writing letters of recommendation for adults seeking gender-affirming care. And I just think that if 1,000 more books like this were to exist, what mountains could be moved? What hearts and minds could be changed? I truly believe that we can do so much good just by putting these kids back at the center of their own narratives, by just telling their stories on their own terms. And I just hope we see so much more of this. So this is the beginning of me guilt-tripping you into buying not just one book, but lots of books. Just saying, I've got 33, so don't be shy. Buy as many as you feel. And I just feel like I've got to do as much as possible right now to plant as many seeds as I possibly can, because I take that seriously. I think that if we're ever going to get out of this sort of quagmire that we're in as a society right now, this really bad time that we're all living through, I think it starts with people's stories. I think it starts with making the world more human. I think it starts with listening.
I agree. I think we're going to go to questions in a minute, and if you're joining us online, if you want to type your questions in, we'll get to them in a minute. But my last question for you is not really for you, it's for the teenagers that you interviewed. If they could wrap it all up in one sentence of something that would help them, what do you think they'd say?
Oh.
One sentence, Nico.
Good luck with that. So we have this little tour tradition that every time I get a new question, we have to snap for new question. So can we snap for new question? Thanks, new question. I think they would really say that it gets down to resources, right? That often people draw this kind of false red state, blue state divide, right? Mm-hmm. That it must be the kids in the red states who are doing badly and the kids in the blue states who are doing well. And that's somewhat true a little bit. I do think that you see the kids in the blue states have fewer challenges than the kids in more conservative areas do. But I think what I saw is that it's the kids who have access to resources that are really thriving. The kids who have safe spaces, whether that's a safe space at home with families that love and support them and help them sort of along their journeys in whatever way they need, or having a school, or having a supportive drop-in space, or having a church, or having this and that. In Alabama, Ridian there is doing really well because he got to go to this school called the Magic City Acceptance Academy that is one of 2 explicitly LGBTQI plus affirming schools in the entire country, and it's based in Homewood, Alabama, right outside Birmingham. It's a wonderful school. I got the chance to go for a day. It was like The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy walks from the sepia world into this Technicolor dreamscape. It was amazing. My first draft of the chapter, my editor left me the funniest note I've ever gotten in any piece of writing I've ever written. He wrote, "There's too much hair in it." because I was just describing everyone's hair, because it was like being at a fabulous dog show. It was like, this person has red hair, this person has pink hair, this person has red and pink hair, this person has pants that are also shorts, where it's like one pant leg was like shorts and the other was like long pants. It's just like the full freedom of expression there was intoxicating. And I got to see how much of a difference that had made in Radiant's life, just being in this space where he could be himself. He'd blossomed. He used to be this shy, introverted kid at his old school who was tremendously bullied and would never go out of his way to say hello or to like introduce himself to someone. And in this school, he was the most popular kid in school. People loved him. He was a leader in class. He was so funny and gregarious. He was like the person that when everybody walked down the hallway, they would all shout like, hey, Ridian, how was your weekend? Or they would like pull their lunch trays aside in hopes that he would like sit there at lunch, because like everybody wanted Ridian sitting at their table. And I think about if every kid had that, right? If every kid had their own version of that, like what could they be? What could they blossom into, right? No matter where they live, like that kind of space can be life-saving for people. So I think that these kids would ask you to build spaces for them, build spaces so that they can thrive. Like you don't know the lives that can be saved when you do that. And you know, every place that I go, I think this is a safe space, right? Like MCC is a beautiful safe space, and I just wish more of it existed. Like I wish more of it existed in Gainesville and across Florida and across this country. So if you're here and you have some way to create more spaces like this, please do it. It makes such a big difference. I've seen it in person. Like I've seen like how beautiful and how life-giving it is. So just please take that responsibility seriously. You just don't know the lives you can save.
I think that's the difference between equity and equality, isn't it? That, you know, we can give everybody the same thing, whereas if we give them a space to flourish the way they need to flourish, that's how we get people to grow into themselves and really find their full selves. You know, we can't give every kid the same thing. We have to have these spaces, which is a nice segue to say that we have with us today Camp Silver, we have with us Tranquility, and we have with us Healing for All. So, and also Elizabeth's here from PFLAG. So if you need resources, please avail yourself of them, and thank you all so much for being here. Questions? Ready to take some more?
Yeah, sure, let's do it.
Okay, anybody got questions? We'll go round the room. So, Jim.
Well, first, I want to praise your very first thing you talked about, which is common cause, because I'm blind, and I've been involved with a group called Blind Pride, which started out as PFLAG, Blind Friends of Lesbian and Gay, years ago, and they left the American Council because there were problems. NFB, which is the other organization, would not do it. But then last week I found out there's a new organization of Pride guide dog handlers. And I may have the name wrong. But finding the common cause, I know is something this community worked really hard on. So I'm sure there's probably more in your book. But I'm always interested in learning about ways of building common cause, because I know that's something that I know a lot of the people that I work with different populations, that's the biggest thing that we like to do is build that common cause, and that's one of the things I like about being part of the Trinity community, the Gainesville community, like Savannah, they're struggling to build some common cause. I mean, I would say I rode with so many people that were comfortable putting their pronouns, and so being blind, I felt like it was a fair question to ask. Can I ask if you're trans? And they would say yes, and I would come out to them, and so I'm glad to see that you are doing so much with common cause. I've tried to find your books in accessible format, and we can talk about that later, but
We've got Audible.
I'm excited about your work.
Okay, but so for the people at home that couldn't hear that, I'm going to try and very briefly summarize it. Jim was saying he's blind, and that there was Blind Pride, and then that stopped. But now there is a group for guide dog handlers. Is that right? and he was saying that he is interested in and glad that Nico is doing work in finding that common cause. So, if somebody has their pronouns out, he feels able to ask the question, if somebody is trans, and if they are, then feels he can come out to them. So really it's about common cause. So.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that was so eloquent that I don't really know what I have to add to it, except to say that I think I've been really inspired recently by other, actions where people have sort of come out for common cause. Like I look at something like the No Kings protest not just in Los Angeles, but it's the one that I happen to go to because it's where I live. That took place, and I'm gonna try not to cry talking about this, but we'll see how it goes. That took place really shortly after there were these raids in Los Angeles that were pretty highly publicized, and one of them targeted this little market near my workplace, it's like this cafe I work at in LA sometimes, so not really my workplace, right? But it was just down the street from this little cafe I happen to be at all the time. And it, I went to film that morning to sort of be, present and just, make people feel accountable and to make sure people know that this is happening. And there was this woman that I saw be loaded into one of the trucks who was she was in a rape offender there, right? She was this little old woman. I think she was Venezuelan, and she was just sending money home to her family. And
Okay.
it just really broke my heart because they always say that they're going after the criminals and the bad hombres, right? That's the one that they really care about. And it's she was just some old lady who was doing right by her family. Who was she hurting? And this woman, she'd never let me pay. It was so annoying. It was horrible business practices, right? Take my money, woman. You need it. But she's just so sweet and just not knowing where she is or what happened or where she is now or if she's safe. It just breaks my heart. But seeing people show up for her in that way, these people who don't know her, who have never met her, seeing these people just show up in the streets to fight for her, even if it hasn't really tangibly made much of a difference in terms of policy or in terms of outcomes, just to see, frankly, people give a fucking shit, just really meant a lot to me. And I just wish we saw a little bit more of that, sort of to your point. I wish we saw a little bit more common cause. I wish we saw a little bit more of people coming out for each other's fights, whether that has anything to do with you or not, right? The way that we're doing that for the No Kings protests, I wish we saw that for all kinds of issues. At the Supreme Court yesterday, from what I heard, or I think what I saw people posting, is that the anti-trans contingent actually outnumbered the trans folks that showed up to support the trans girl who was speaking that day. And that just really broke my heart. I think we need to see allies in the streets. I think we need to all of us be better allies to each other. I think we need to keep showing up. We need to keep staying loud. I'm so grateful to everyone who showed up for Renee Good over the past couple weeks, and to her partner Becca, who I know just must be going through absolute hell right now. But we need to keep that momentum up. We need to keep fighting. We need to keep fighting for everybody who needs our voices right now. And I think there are just so many people who are being unheard because there's so much to fight. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. So yeah, I don't know if I have anything necessarily to add except to say thank you for bringing up that lovely point, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Next round was David.
Do you have any plans for follow-up with the subjects that you've written about? Do you see how that happens?
So well, before you do that,
yeah,
just for
sure.
the people online, so David asked the question, do you have any plans for follow-up? Because it would be nice to see how they're doing later on down the line.
Well, I'll say, wouldn't you like to know? Just kidding. To be honest, I really don't know. Initially, in my head, I had definitely written this with the hopes of doing a follow-up at some point. I sort of drew from a lot of reference points in order to make this. I was thinking about Hoop Dreams, which is an amazing documentary. I was thinking about Great Gardens. I was thinking about David Sedaris's work, but I was also thinking about this really amazing British documentary series, which you probably know, called 7 Up, where it checks in with the same group of British young people every 7 years. And I think they got all the way to 52 or 59 up before they stopped. But I thought of this sort of like similarly, that it would be really interesting to keep following these kids as they like grow and mature and, you know, become these like adults who like, you know, go out and like live their own lives and, you know, take the world by storm. And I have some interest in telling that story, but I don't know if these kids would want to do it. And it's not because they had a bad experience with this book. I think we all got something really lovely out of it, and we talk all the time and we'll know each other for the rest of our lives. Like we're just part of each other's families now, and I feel so lucky for that. But I also know that it was a lot for them to be in this book. You know, it just was a lot of emotional energy. They really gave so much of themselves to all of us. And I think a lot of the kids just wouldn't want to do something like that again. And for somebody like, you know, Rubia said really explicitly that she feels really angry, not with me or the book or, you know, anybody fighting for equality, but knowing that she's fought so much and she's put herself out there so many times, you know, doing this book, speaking in the legislature over and over again, doing this, doing that, doing this, doing that, and you still see where we are. And she just feels fed up with it. She just feels like she just can't keep putting herself out there for people who don't deserve her vulnerability. And she's just angry, and she just wants to go like live her life for a while. Like she kind of feels like she did her time, and now she just wants to like enjoy this world the best that she can, despite everything going on. And I think that that joy is activism. I think that her just living her life is activism. And if that's the kind of activism that she needs to do right now, not this, then I totally get that. And I imagine, you know, we haven't talked about it that much because I'm trying to give them space. But I would imagine most of the kids feel that way, right? That it's like now time for them to go do a different kind of activism. Mm-hmm. And I've been thinking about instead, you know, what would it look like in 7 years or 10 years to do like 7 different kids or do this project slightly differently. But I just don't know yet. I think I need to see where the world is, you know, and what kind of story will seem the most valuable. Because like when this was, you know, being written 2022, 2023, I think this was, to me, felt like the best way to engage. It felt like the best way to get these voices out there and to make sure these kids felt like they were being heard and seen, because that was the most important thing to me, just making sure that these kids felt like someone who was listening. But maybe in 10 years from now, there will be a different way to do this. Like I'm not really supposed to talk about this like publicly, but I'm sort of in my own life exploring how to do my advocacy differently. I'm probably getting my MDiv like after I stop touring, just because I feel like I've been trying to engage in non-religious contexts for a really long time, and as much as I've found that to be beautiful and valuable, and I'm so proud of that work, like I just think I need to do things a little differently. I think that there's like, I tried that way, and we see where the world is right now, right? So I want to try a different way and see if that's any more effective. If, you know, we're able sort of to engage these voices or engage the sort of the other side by not shying away from religion, but engaging religion directly to say, you don't own God, you don't own spirituality. Like these, you know, the idea of family values, right? That's not the exclusive province of the right. You know, these are universal concepts that speak to all of our lives. And I think that I just want to keep figuring out how to do the work I do effectively and meaningfully in a way that, you know, not only like honors these kids' voices, but I think like respects their time and their input by doing it better, you know? And if I figure out a way to do that better where like it's like we can get farther reach or, you know, we can really make effective change, then I'll absolutely do that. But I also just know like these kids, you know, they went through a lot to be able to do this, right? And if I do it again, I just need to do that really respectfully and mindfully. And I, you know, as their friend now, as their like family member, I just take that really seriously. Sorry, I'm incapable of giving a short answer. I'm so sorry.
Quick questions? Sorry, I don't know your name. I'm so sorry. Ty.
Yeah, I love that centering the people that you're working with, telling their story, centering their joy, their experience, their way of telling the story. And it sounds like it takes a lot out of you being in the middle of all of that. The weight isn't totally lifted. What are you doing? Like, what kind of joy activism are you doing for yourself?
Sleep.
Okay,
Sorry,
let me. Right, so Daz asked a question about just making the point that this was exhausting, that they liked the fact that you were doing, centering other people's stories, etc. But what are you doing for yourself, for your joy, your activism?
Yeah, sleep was kind of a joke, although that's also maybe true. I do sleep a lot now. I
Good.
think
You
I
can
don't
sleep through the animals tonight.
I sleep at a level now that I don't know is medically advisable. Like, am I sleeping too much? Is it now bad for me? But you know what? It feels great. And other than that, I've actually really. Oh yes, please. God bless you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you. I've really tried to take silliness seriously, if that makes any sense. Like, I grew up quite poor. So because of that, I knew that if I were going to make anything of my life, it had to come from me. Like, I had to do it. And, like, I was the kind of person, like, in English class our sophomore year, they gave us this list of suggested books, and we had to pick 2 of them for our final project for the year. I read every book on that list, right? I was the try-hardest of try-hards, just because I just felt like no one's going to make it happen if not for me. And because of that, I just took myself so seriously for such a long time. And I think I'm still kind of breaking out of that a little bit and trying to cultivate a little bit of whimsy and just like silliness in my life. Like, I used to make fun of people who watched The Real Housewives because I thought that was like stupid. And it's like, these drunk women, what can you possibly see in this? And I would just like to say, I was so incredibly wrong. I'm so sorry to everyone I made fun of. All those women are geniuses and they deserve Nobel Prizes. Like, on the okay, if you're a spoiler reverse, go like this for like a minute. But in the series premiere of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, which is one of the best things to ever grace television, if you're not watching it already, please do it. It is a true joy. Mary Cosby, who is what I wouldn't give to read her like therapist file. It would be great reading. They sort of, over the course of the episode, they build up that she had some sort of medical trauma in a hospital, right? And they keep going back to it again and again, that this really bad thing happened to her. And I was really feeling for her. I was like, oh, honey, okay, well, whatever happened, like, you know, yeah, I'm glad you're okay. And I thought they were gonna do that thing where they just dangle it like a carrot and then they never tell you actually what happened, because they do that on most Real Housewives shows. No, they tell you in the first episode. So at the end, she's having this sort of like tearful breakdown in a restaurant where she confesses that she had all of her sweat glands removed and she almost died twice on the operating table. And I laughed so hard that I thought I was going to hurt myself. And I just found like little ways in my life like to carve out like space for things that just don't matter. Like, everything right now feels so serious all the time. And it's like, feels like the fate of the world is hanging in the balance, because at times it is literally hanging in the balance. ICE is out there like shooting people in the face. And I just feel like I've had to be really firm in my life around creating boundaries around that. That it's like, I'm not disengaging, right? Like, it's so important to take time to engage, to take time to inform ourselves, and to not like step away from the fight, right? But also having space in our day where you just don't do that, where you just do something else. Like, I become very when I'm not online, I'm not online. When I'm not working, I'm not working. I don't want to talk about this. My husband, he's a big NPR guy, and he'll just like listen to NPR all day and just get really worked up. And it's like, he'll like, the moment I get in the car, he'll be like, you won't believe what's going on in the Senate. And I'm just like, I'm pretty sure I would believe it. I don't want to talk about this. Can we talk about literally anything else? Can we talk about that horror movie where a monkey rips people's faces off or something, right? You know, I just feel like I need that sort of balance in my life to sustain myself right now. My favorite problematic celebrity is Gwyneth Paltrow, because I take such joy in how stupid she is, and that at least she's like conning the right women, or she's like conning rich white women, and I'm like into that. If she ever cons poor white women, then I'll like come for her, but right now I'm like, take their money. And there's this quote that she says, where she says, life is about the balance between tofu and cigarettes, and that is not medically advisable, but like I understand that sort of idea of you just need different energies in your life. And for me, I just feel like I'm trying to find like that sort of balance for myself right now, because we have to make this sustainable for all of us. We're going to be fighting this fight for generations. I'm going to be fighting this for the rest of my life. And if it means I need to sleep for a while or take a day off or just like enjoy a week where I just don't go online, like this fight is going to still be waiting there for me. We just all have to make sure that we come back to it after we're feeling energized again.
Definitely.
Thanks for the question.
Giselle?
So you mentioned, I don't remember if you said you were writing the book or it came out in 22, 23?
Written in 2022 and 2023, came out in 2024.
Okay, so, I know that feels like it was just, 3-ish years ago,
Oh, yeah.
but the world is so different in the last 3 years. Have you found your message as you're going on your book tours, or like, have you found that the message has changed or not changed because nothing has changed, and yet so much has changed?
So the question from Giselle was, the book was written in 22, 23. Has anything changed, basically?
Yeah, or has the message changed?
Has the message changed, yeah.
I think for me, the answer is, excuse me, oh God, this Cuban food, delicious, but I'm tasting it all over again. It's like, did you miss me? I think the answer is yes and no, in that you're right. Things have gotten, and I'm not like a doomsday kind of person, right? But objectively, things have gotten much worse, right? Because you have all of these statewide battles that these kids were fighting then, and they're still fighting. Last year, we had a historic number of anti-trans bills introduced in states all across the country. There were over 1,000, by far the most in history, introduced in all states but one. And then on top of that, on top of those state-level bills they were fighting already before, now they're fighting the federal government, right? So you have this sort of double whammy hitting you all the time. And it's like, it was bad during the first Trump administration when it came to like attacks on like trans people and trans youth, but not like this. Like, I covered the first 4 years of Trump every day and didn't get a day off. I never got a vacation, right? So I know, like, firsthand on the ground what that was like. And this is exponentially worse. There's, like, not even, night and day doesn't even, like, cover it, right? It's just it's a different world. And these kids feel that, so many of them have had to move or, like, flee the country. Like Ruby, she left. She went to France. Right? And that breaks my heart because it's like, your friend's gone and your friend's like away from her community and her family in this like totally foreign place where she just doesn't really know anybody. And it's these tremendous sacrifices that families are making all the time. And those are just the families that are privileged enough to do it. So many other families are just sort of like stuck without any resources and they just don't know what to do. And that's really hard. But I think for me, it's made, unfortunately, the message of this book only more meaningful. That I really genuinely hoped that the election would like put me out of business, right? That like, because this was written, I know I'm supposed to be like, as a journalist, apolitical, but I'm also a human being, right? And like, I wanted this book to change hearts and minds so that way we made, a different decision, right? But obviously that didn't happen. And people still made the decision that they were gonna make. And I just feel like for me, one of the reasons that I've been on the ground so much with this book is that I just don't want to make the same mistake twice. That I feel like I was a little complacent, in 2024. I genuinely believed that things were going to go differently. Just, having covered 4 years of the first administration and just what a nightmare it was, right? And how disorganized and how dysfunctional. I was just like, how could people want this again? Just from a pure objective perspective, how could people want that level of mess? It's like driving a Ford Pinto once and then deciding you want to drive it again. It's like, what? You just want your engine to explode? And it just felt so unrealistic, but here we are. And now I feel like it means that I've got to plant those seeds for the future, right? That we're stuck with this for the next 3 years, right? There's no changing that. Even if something happens to this man, we'll get another man who will be, just as bad, if not worse, right? In some ways. So I feel like for me, I'm trying to uplift these kids' voices for the future. So that way we can learn from this time period. We can learn from their struggle and we can learn from their humanity. So that one day we can finally see these kids as being human beings. And it's so sad because I feel like it's asking so little, right? But right now it almost feels like we're asking for the moon. And I just don't think that we'll ever really, as I said before, I don't think we'll ever really get out of this until we stop letting this fear-mongering win. Because something that the right has done really effectively is they've taken this sort of vacuum on trans issues where it's sort of like based on a lack of knowledge and just like misinformation, right? And they just filled that with like fear and hatred and lies, that vacuum. And instead I'm like, what if we filled it with these kids' voices, with their perspectives, their hopes, their dreams? What if we just filled it with love? Like, what could we be? Where could we go? And I also just think it takes fundamentally changing the nature of this country. You know, I've taken to heart that a lot of people, or a lot of folks on Twitter have, or not Twitter, they call it X now, or like Blue Sky, have been saying that they'll hear all the time, oh, this is not who we are, this is not who we are as America. It's absolutely who we are. If we look at the history of this country, this is who we are, this is who we've always been, right? This is not different in some way. It just takes finally building a country that's built on goodness and a respect of difference. You know, I don't think that we've ever really been good in this country of affirming rights and protections of people who don't have the same lives as us, who might make different choices than we do in our lives. We used to literally own people in this country because they were different from us, right? And I just feel like at some point we've got to get good at that. And I don't know what it takes to get there. I genuinely do not know the answer. I do not know the solution. I think the most important 3 words in the English language are I don't know. But I feel like this is the lever that I can pull, right? And I've just got to keep pulling it and hope that it helps contribute in some way to that solution. I don't know if it will, but I've got to try.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions in the room? If not, Azrael, are there any questions online? There aren't. Okay.
Going once, going twice.
Kathy.
David, I think that what you said about us fighting for everyone, not just LGBTQ or whatever, I think that the government that we have now is doing an excellent job, because when we did no Black Lives Matter and all these protests came out, the next thing that came out is it wasn't about Black lives anymore, it's about trans kids. And now that people are standing up for trans kids, and we have Equality Florida here that has turned a lot of the bills in Florida, or have attempted to do that, it's now we're going after the immigrants, and it doesn't allow people, we need a better, if as Catherine says, if one person isn't free, none of us are free.
Yeah.
And like you said, we need to come out for Black Lives Doesn't Matter, for the immigrants. Like the No Kings March is a really good example. It was one focus that a lot of people came out for. And I think on the other side of the coin, that's the message that we have to get out, that it is love, like what you're saying, but everybody has to demonstrate that. You know, it's the love against hate. It's not love against Black Lives Matter, not love against immigrants. This is the thing. They're spreading hate, and we need to respond with love.
Okay, I'm going to try and summarize that it's late at night for me. I'm a farm girl. So Kathy was saying that there's like, you've got the Black Lives Matter and then you have the trans kids and stuff, but it's more about, you know, there are all these things we can come out against, but there is so much hatred as well. So really it's about all of us coming out and tackling hate with love. Would that be? Yes. Thank you.
They divide, you know, it's a way of dividing us. And as soon as we start coming together, they're like, oh, look at this problem over here.
Okay, so it's like a diversion tactic. You know, if there's this problem, we divert to this. Whereas if we keep everything under an umbrella and keep it all together, it's much more, it's a unified action. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you pretty much said everything, but I think the only thing I would add really is what you're voicing here is the power of coalition building, and it's something that we need to do more of. It's one of the reasons that, when I've been doing these events, I've been making sure to do them at faith spaces, these spaces that people wouldn't expect a talk like this to happen. You know, people always assume that I'm going to go to a bookstore, right? But I just feel like I need to sort of help build these bridges with communities where it might not feel as obvious. It feels very obvious to me personally that I would be having this discussion in a faith space, right? Especially a progressive faith space. But I think for folks who might not even know that they're welcomed in a place like that, making that, like voicing that and making that clear and making that visible, I think that's just a good thing to do. And you know what Catherine has done really well is inviting other organizations into the space, right? And that's something that we've really tried to do with so many of the events that I've worked to put together, is being like, okay, how do we make this almost into a resource fair, right? Where all of these groups can come together and sort of share space together to lift up this issue. Because, you know, if I can sort of be, you know, needle a little bit, my hope is always that more beautiful things come out of that. That people, you know, when they're in this space together, can talk and think about, like, okay, how do we keep working together? How do we keep building this coalition? How do we, like, you know, really, like, continue this sort of little bit of momentum, right? Like, I just hope to, like, matchmake a little bit. So consider that me, like, inducing, matchmaking a little night. What beautiful things can come out of this, I don't know. But I just know that wonderful things can happen when we just share space together. That's literally like what a church is, right? That like when people come together, you know, for good, for justice, for something divine, you know, that's where the Lord is.
It's interesting that in November, Alachua County Faith Leaders Alliance, it brings all the faith leaders together in Alachua County. In November, we had an event called Hope and Love Are Stronger. And it was really to counter the white national Christian rhetoric that's out there. And it's Muslim, it's Buddhist, it's Christian, more evangelical, Christian progressive, it's all different parts of the community coming together to look at hope and love as being stronger. And I think if the faith groups can do it, goodness me, then surely the rest of us can do it as well. Yeah. So I'm going to say thank you so much, Nico. I invite you to thank Nico so much for being here. I know he's going to sign some books and probably answer more questions if you have them.
Yeah, and I'll also just say one last thing,
yes.
If it's okay. Authors don't normally do this, but I'd like to give one last not-so-gentle push to please buy the book. I have all kinds of payment that I take, cash card, Venmo, PayPal. I'll take goat if you got it. Please don't do that, but, you know, I probably...
Yeah, no goat, more goats at our house.
Yeah, right. Poor Catherine would end up with it. But, you know, what I was saying before about, you know, the importance of getting this message out, I think it's really critical for me to, like, you know, obviously, you know, I'm so glad that you're all here tonight. This is like my mental health care right now, right? People sometimes ask, like, how I'm sort of staying through all this, you know, my joy. This is really my joy. Being here with all of you is my joy. So thank you for that. Thank you for being present for something like this. It just gives me hope. It keeps me going. But sometimes people will ask, you know, how do we reach those people who are never going to come to something like this, right? Mm-hmm. The kind of folks that like need persuaded but are never going to show up. And I say that I rely a little bit on all of you to be my disciples a little bit. And that you all have access to spaces that I'm never going to be able to go to, and to meet people that I'll never get to be able to see. And one of the reasons that I wrote a book is that I always do something. When I read a really good book, I give it to somebody. That's the first thing I do. I'm like, oh, you've got to read this. This was so great. It'll like change your life, right? I like Natalie Portman and Garden State, like all like, you know, my books to people in my life. And you can do the same thing here. So think about, you know, obviously I want you all to buy a book tonight, but think about books for the other people in your lives. You know, think about the hearts and minds that can be changed. Think about the mountains that could be moved. There was this, you know, this woman that I talked to in Atlanta who I bullied into buying 10 books. And by that I mean I talked to her nicely until she bought 10 books. And I don't know what she's going to do with all of them, but that is not my business. I assume everybody in her life got them for Christmas. And I know that Christmas is over now, but you have so many other holidays. There's Arbor Day, there's Valentine's Day, there's the 4th of July. So just think about all of those things. And also think about the fact that the doors are locked and you can't leave unless you buy a book. And if you think that you're getting out of here without buying a book, I will chase you down the street. But I do just, again, want to say thank you all so much for being here to do this work with me. It really just means the world. It really is the only thing that's keeping me like positive right now, right? If it seems like I'm this like joyful, ebullient person, it's really because of all of you. And I'm just so grateful to be in your company. And I'm so grateful to Catherine for hosting this. And I'm so happy to be here. And I'll be even happier if you buy 10 books. So thank you all so much.
And just a reminder to pop and see Camp Silver, Tranquility, Healing for All, and also talk to Elizabeth. You may not need the resources today, but you may encounter somebody that needs those resources. So please take them. Thank you again, Nico. Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
everybody. Beautiful. And I'll just stay here. I think that's probably
You stay there.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep the microphone on so we know what you say.
Oh, yeah. Hot mic, hot mic. Oh, my marker's gone. Do we have a Sharpie?
Sharpie?
Yeah.
Do you have any Sharpies, Ezra? Not the
I'm like, every office has a Sharpie of some kind.
Well, you think so, but people take them.
Oh, yes. There are thieves. There are thieves among us. Hello. How's it going?
Thank you so much for coming here. I just moved to Gainesville, and you're actually going to Orlando, I think.